Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Evermore YouTube channel. It's Chris and Mark back at the same time, Monday night, 9:30, or slightly just beyond 9:30, because Mark was messing around with his gadgets and his toys in the background. But we are here asking the same question we ask every week. What's going on? I'll tell you what's going on, Mark. 8 wins on the spin, and the boy wonder is back. What's going on with you, mate?
The boy wonder, indeed. Yeah, it was a good performance, wasn't it, from him? And it's been a little bit of a foot off the gas weekend, I think, this weekend with cup football to watch, and there's not been quite so much pressure, unless you're from Sunderland and you didn't turn up to the match. But that's
we couldn't wait long enough to get that in. But more on that,
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist it.
Like a kid at Christmas, mate. Couldn't wait to get stuck into the Mackems. But more on them in a minute as well. I'm sure we'll be talking more about the Mackems than they actually talked about going to the game. Massive amount of overtime at Nissan, I think, this weekend. But we'll get stuck into that in a minute. We are live as always tonight, guys. Smash a comment in. Let us know what you guys think about the topics we're talking about and just the overall weekend of football. And if you do like this kind of a thing, subscribe, smash the button. We are over 9,550 now, I think we are, which is amazing. So we're closing in on 9,600 actually. So we're flying up towards 10K. That's the next milestone.
6 away.
Absolutely. Go. We're flying to the milestone. So there'll be some more prizes to give away when we hit the magic 10K, which will be amazing for us as a channel. And thank you for the one who's helped get us to this level so far. So let's get stuck in there, Mark. Obviously, the FA Cup dominated the weekend. Loads of fixtures all over the shop. We hosted Bromley. First ever tie between Newcastle and Bromley, managed by former Newcastle goalkeeping coach Andy Woodman, who, it must be said, what a character he seemed. Class act. He was great on the BBC, full of banter, full of crack. I was a massive fan of taking the lads for a cheeky Nando's in the town before the game, which I thought was absolutely quality, to be fair. He just seemed to be really loving being back in Newcastle. He was very complimentary about it. But the game didn't quite go to plan, did it really? We had a couple of barnstorming goals to pull us out of the mire, mate. But how did you find the game in general?
I mean, it was an odd sort of start, wasn't it? Because it was, I sort of genuinely thought with the form going into it, and I know there were that whole host of changes, but you thought that Bromley might come and try and contain. I don't think that's quite their style, but might try and just keep it tight, as the cliche is, keep it tight for the first 20 minutes and see how things go. Bollocks to it, they'll go for it. And the lad scores an absolute blinder. In what, 7 minutes? It was some goal. Little bit iffy in terms of defending from Miley, funnily enough. I thought he could have been a little bit stronger on that play, but not taking anything away from is it Cosgrave that scored the?
I think it was Congreve. I think it was Congreve.
Apologies, my
good strike, to be fair. I mean, looking at it, your knowledge of League Two players is abysmal, Mark.
I am sorry. Congreve, that's it. Yes,
you're slipping, mate.
Cameron.
No, it was a good strike. I mean, I think Dubravka, people give Dubravka a bit of stick for it, but I think he put it right in the corner. I don't think Dubravka was expecting it at all. But I think I said this in the post match, and we'll get into Miley in a minute because I've got plenty to say about that young boy, absolutely. But I love the way he pulled himself back up, and he grabbed the game by the nuts, really. If it wasn't for Miley's performance in a pretty lackluster first half for Newcastle, I think we possibly could have been 2-0 down if it wasn't for Miley getting a hold of the situation. So I was really glad to see that. But I mean, it's been an interesting kind of post-match analysis, really, from it, Mark, in terms of everybody talking about it. I mean, we've got consistent there saying sell Barnes this window, doesn't get enough game time. So a few players came in for a little bit of stick. I think a lot of people were kind of underplaying it because it's eight wins on the spin, because of the Christmas that we've had, because we won the game. Some people are going, what are you complaining about? We won the game. Stop being negative. But some of the performances from players with over 200 appearances for this club, 60-odd caps for South American national teams, players who have actually won the fucking FA Cup in the squad in the shape of Harvey Barnes. Some of the performances for them in the first half, Mark, I mean, it was pub team-esque, wasn't it? By some of the lads. It was embarrassing, man.
Lackluster, I think, is the kind of kind term for it, because it just, the passing from the couple of passes that Almiron tried to play across the field towards Barnes were so under hit And you're right. This is from an international footballer, somebody who's played in the Premier League for a number of years now, and to woefully underhit those passes is criminal against anybody, not just because it's against Bromley. And I mean, the one that nearly causes the second goal from Danny Imrie, who races up that right hand side and is really unlucky not to make it 2-0, because that's a brilliant interception and run, and obviously I think that was heading towards Matty Target, gets caught out by the pass there for that one. I don't get it. I mean, I know you touched on it in the aftermath today about, that there's an element that says, well, players, that lack of cohesion or that lack of game time, I sort of understand that. But these are professional players. These are players that have played an enormous number of minutes in football and training, and I know it's not exactly the same, but it's not like they've never played together. Those players, maybe this isn't 11, but it's not like those players. Trippier and Almiron have played an enormous number of minutes together. Joe Linton and Miley have played well together. So throw Sean into that as well. It's not like those players are brand new to each other. But the performance for a lot of the first half, you would have thought they'd just been thrown in off the street at times. The standout from that was Miley, because Miley took control and his just ability on the ball is brilliant. But he got the bit between his teeth and decided that was it. I'm going to make up for the little mistake I've made and get us back into this game. But I look back at the number of poor passes and just lack of energy from the likes of Barnes and Mickey and Sean, and to be honest, even Joe Linton to a point, because I don't think he was particularly good in the first half. I think he's missed an awful lot of criticism given what's gone on. But even for Joe Linton, that was a really lackluster performance too.
That's Joe Willock's fault. I think Joe Linton was on the bevy the night before because he thought he wasn't playing. He was fucking livid when his phone went in the morning. It was Eddie Howe. He was hanging, waiting to get himself a bacon sandwich, I think. But I think my favourite performance out of everybody was Fabian Schär, because if you could sum up a phrase of Fabian Schär's performance, you can imagine he went, Bromley. Bromley. Because he was just swagging around the pitch, completely like on about 30%. Couldn't really be bothered. Not in a bad way, just couldn't be arsed. I mean, he was that lackluster, he might as well have had his cock out swinging it on the fucking halfway line. That's how Schär was playing. He just really couldn't give a rat's ass, to be fair. But because Schär's such a good player, it didn't really show him up to be bad or anything like that. But as I say, I think the spotlight was on some of them players. The disappointing thing is, yes, we won the game, right? And that's what's important. I think Phil said it before in the comments, right? But
that's fair.
You want competition for places. You want the players in the starting 11 to look at somebody like Lewis Miley, which we'll get into in a minute, because he's probably the only bright spark of the game, apart from Asula's goal, which we'll talk about in a second. But, you want somebody to push these lads to go, fucking hell, look how well he played in the cup. I better sort my shit out and put in a performance against Wolves because this kid's chomping at the bit. And you just didn't see that from the likes of Barnes, from Almiron, from Longstaff. And I understand a lot of people saying, it doesn't matter how well they play, they won't get the first team. Well, not like that. If Sean Longstaff has had over 200 appearances for this club, and he's the manager is a huge favourite of Sean, and Sean has been played ahead of Sandro Tonali, which now just looks completely batshit crazy, like when you start wondering it. But if Sean put in a few good performances on the spin, he might have forced his way back into the team. I'm not saying he should, but he might. But he looked like a player to me who kind of realizes that his time is running out. As Lawrence says there, we have to ship Longstaff and Miggy out and get a right winger. And I mean, there's a lot of talk about Miggy. We'll talk about him in the transfer talk. But before we get into Louis Miley, Mark, massive buzz for Will Asula for this goal. I mean, obviously Bruno and Gordon come on, and that really spikes up the quality on the pitch. You can see that. And I think that showed Barnes up even more for his lackluster performance, because Gordon was on the pitch for 2 or 3 seconds and he looked bang up for it. Gordon could have been playing against Arsenal, Manchester United, Man City. He was running at those players. Those League Two players must be thinking, what the fuck has he been drinking? Look at the state of this kid. I couldn't catch him if I had a Volkswagen Golf to jump in and drive after him, because he was all over the place. But Barnes was so shit in the first half, trying to shoot all the time, not passing the ball, running into dead alleys. And Gordon and Bruno gave that quality, but Bruno slips the ball to Asula, and he kind of runs the wrong side of the ball and then corrects it and goes back. But holy shit, none of us were expecting that for a first goal at James's Park. I mean, what a screamer, man.
I mean, how to open your account, really, isn't it? You know, I mean, that's that run in, cut in from the last time, then fade to come inside the defender as well, and just unleash an unstoppable shot. I mean, he's got that in his locker, and I think
clearly,
although not having seen it at Sheffield United, I think if you go back and look at some of the goals that he scored for the Danish like under 21s and stuff like that, he's got that sort of performance in it, or that sort of finish in his locker. I think he can be a finisher, but those explosive finishes, I think, are sort of things that he can do. But that'll give him a world of confidence, you know. He's going to be limited for game time and sitting behind Isak. But if he can start to get that confidence and start to put one or two away every now and again, you know, he gets in the odd 15 minutes and comes in and bags, then he's gonna be brimming with confidence, and that then starts to and you talked about putting pressure on the first team and that starting 11. If he starts to score regularly from the bench, then that starts to put pressure on those players ahead of him in terms of him wanting to get into the side. And it might take a year or so for him to sort of force his way in a little bit more. But if he can continue to do that, then that's exactly what you want. I mean, yeah, he did.
He did smash his ball back off the post as well, to be fair. Which showed you he was interested. Yeah, he did. He was interested in getting in. He was interested in getting in to the box. Comment there before from Trevor. He feels like he's on his own, Harvey Barnes, but he's proven this season how good and effective he can be. What have Longstaff and Armand done this season? Barnes can be a value with his confidence level. I do agree with that to an extent, Trevor, that Barnes has quality, and that's what makes it more frustrating when he turns into performance like that at the weekend. You know, Eddie said he pulled a muscle mark. I don't know whether he was trying to save his blushes a little bit because he was really poor. But ever since Barnes has been getting a chance recently, he's just not taking it. You know, he's not cutting inside with those shots that he used to. He's not making those penetrating runs. His touch is poor. His decision making's bad. You know, and I don't see the Harvey Barnes that we were seeing in cameos when we were all screaming for him to be in the team, along with Gordon. I just don't see that player anymore. And I think the problem with Barnes is, we've said this before, that signing is looking weirder and weirder as the weeks go by because, you know, Harvey Barnes can't come in and out of the team. I think he has to stay in the team and get his rhythm and get into his game. And then he gets a goal or two and he goes on a run and he just doesn't stop scoring. Whereas he's in the team, he's like the fucking hokey cokey, isn't it? Newcastle, he's in and he's out, he's in and he's out. And that doesn't help him get his consistency of form. People said the same thing with Longstaff. And I kind of understand that to an extent, but I think the problem Longstaff has now, and we're going to talk about him in a minute, there's a young lad coming right up behind him on the old motorway and pull over into the lay-by Sean because this kid's taken over you, mate. Absolutely, after that performance of the weekend. And we already knew it was there, but the weekend just cemented it. But R.E. Barnes, Mark, would you sell Barnes? And would anybody buy him this window with his injury problems and his, you know, inconsistency? Would you sell him?
I think it'd be tough to try and do that, given the outlay for him. I don't think you recoup that, and so it almost becomes a pointless sale because you're not going to make the money back from him. You're not going to get the 40-odd million from him. You said before it's a strange signing, and even when the interview with Howe not immediately pre-game, but before I think it was before the weekend, and he was talking about Barnes, and he said he's obviously the difficulty in him getting into the side because of Anthony Gordon. And you sit there and you go, well, why did you sign him? Because he's I
don't think he did.
Essentially, he's a first team player. I mean, Harvey Barnes wants to be a first team player. He's that player. You know, you go back to his seasons at Leicester and Premier League games, 36, 25, 32, 34. Those were his league games played, and the majority of those are starts. He's come into a Newcastle squad that has a player that's ahead of him, and he's
way ahead
not
of him.
going to. He's not going to force his way into that, and he's not a. I think he was sort of a decent sort of outlay or foil when Leicester were obviously with Vardy as the point always being on the shoulder. That he was great at then being able to run in from that left hand side, and we've seen flashes of it. But because of the form of Gordon over the last 18 months, we've just not seen it enough, and it does baffle you a bit to think, well, to drop 40 million on a player like that isn't going to be your starter. And I guess eventually that will be the case as time goes on and you start challenging for cups and leagues and things, and the squad will evolve. But this early into the project, to drop that amount of money on a player that is not going to be your your starting player down that side, it does seem a little bit baffling. My only thought in my head was, with the whole Gordon thing, was, did they think he was going to move on quicker? Did they think he was going to move away? I don't know.
Possibly. We said that about Tonali and Bruno, didn't we? Did they think that Bruno was going to get sold and Tonali was going to be Bruno's replacement? And there's a lot of speculation we can throw at this kind of a thing. But I think Bruno and Tonali showed how well they can play together, whereas Barnes just doesn't seem like he fits in this team. And it's a shame because I do like him as a player. I think he has got a lot to offer. But unless he can adapt his game and learn to play on the right wing and make an impact there, I just don't see a place for him in the team.
The funny thing is, I mean, his goal record is really good. I mean, if you look at these 2 Premier League seasons for you,
I'm for that, by the way. I've said that before. I'd go to Brentford and offer Barnes and cash for him 100%.
I think as transfers go, that I think that's an ideal one, isn't it? Because you sort of solve two problems in one. The only problem at that point becomes then who fills in on the left, or do you then have the Willock, Joe Linton sort of point where you play them down the left hand side when
Willock's never fit is another problem. That's another problem to talk about in a minute. So,
but to look at Barnes, I mean, this season, if you look at his 90 zone, yes, he's played 20 games so far in the league. He scored 5 goals and has 1 assist. But minutes wise, he's played just over 8.5 games. So 5 goals and an assist in 8.5 games ain't bad. 5 goals and 3 assists last Premier League season, and he played just under 9 games. It's not a bad return. The problem is Gordon, and Gordon is always going to be ahead of him in that pecking order. Unless his form totally drops off or he leaves, then Barnes is always going to play second fiddle. So unless he can adapt, which he's never really played anywhere else throughout his sort of top flight career in the Championship, he's always played from that left hand side. So it's a really difficult one for him, and he might find that he might have to leave for his own sake rather than anything else.
Yeah, I think he's probably right. Jonathan's right there. He said, unfortunately for Barnes, that's football. But why we got a left winger when other areas we needed strength, and Gordon's usually never present as well. He's rarely injured, and yeah, it is a very, very strange one. I think certainly when you look at players who could be sold to cash in to help balance the PSR and the FFP, as Kieran Maguire said on the video that we did, in terms of the balancing of the books and then having, money left over for spending, we probably are going to have to sell some of these players. I think Trevor asked a question there before, which before we get into the wonder kid that is Lewis Miley, I've got plenty to say about him in a second. But Trevor, same question to both of us. Do you think, given Bruno's 28 this year, that we perhaps won't cash in on BJ? I mean, we talked about this before, Mark. I think there was a genuine thought that Bruno might leave the club. I think they put the £100 million price tag on to try and coax people out to bid. I generally think that, not to scare them off, to bid so they could use that 100 million to develop in 2 or 3 key areas. It didn't happen. Bruno obviously said he wanted to stay. Then they talked about the captain's armband and everything else. Then it was Elliot Anderson who was the one that was sold to balance PSR and FFP along with Minter, who obviously never played for us. But, in terms of our big players or our class lads, as they call them over at the True Faith podcast, we don't want to sell any of them really in the situation that we're in now, pushing for Champions League, looking like we might get it, potential cup final. You don't want to sell your best players But we are going to have to try and find revenue from somewhere. And out of all those players potentially who could leave the club, Barnes probably is the most sellable asset, isn't he? Really, out of all those players, Longstaff, Almiron, Wilson, Dubravka, even Joe Willock, Barnes is probably the one who fetches the highest fee out of all those, I would say.
He does, but he also has the highest amount of money still tied up in him.
True.
Because he's only a year and a half into his contract. So even if you take the fact that you've amortized his 40 million fee over 5 years, then that's only 12 million of his sort of fee that's gone. So you'd have to clear him off. You're still talking about getting 30 million from him, and I'm not entirely sure you get that for him. He's worth it in terms of his output over time. I'm just not sure that you get that value from him. I think there's value in the trade.
Yeah.
If you look at the Brian Mbeumo one, I think it would be a cracking deal. I'm not sure that Brentford would go for it. I think they are probably very adamant that they want cash, they want money, they want to.
Yeah, but they need it. They probably need it, Mark, to balance themselves out and to spend. So,
well, they're one of those clubs that buys cheap and sells high, and you go back to the likes of Watkins and stuff that they sold on. They bought in for absolute peanuts, and they sell them for 30 odd million. So they've got that down to a T. They're sort of the newer version of Brighton, I guess, in that regard. So they'll want money. They'll want to be able to then reinvest that in the sort of the money ball, what sort of way that they're running. So I'm not sure a minimal cash plus player would suit them. But you never know. They might do. But he doesn't replace Mbeumo if he does go away, because he's the opposite flank. So it's a difficult one.
It's a big test for Barnes, I think, because there is a really good player in there. There's a player that can finish. There's a player that can get assists. And there's a really good footballer in there. There is no doubt about that at all. His goal record, as you say, is exemplary. But I think he's at a stage of his career now. And this is probably a good test of Eddie's managerial mettle as well. Because if he can get a hold of Barnes and get him to adapt his game and figure out a way to fit into this team and get into this team, a bit like Joe Linton did when he changed positions, or a bit like Jacob Murphy's managed to do recently. If Barnes can get that sorted, then there's no reason why he can't have a huge impact in this Newcastle United setup. But it's up to Barnes massively, I think. He can't just sit there and go, well, I want to play where Anthony Gordon plays, because that's not going to work. Because Gordon is going to play there. As NZ Bob says, Barnes seems a bit one-dimensional to me, no tracking back, a bit selfish. He certainly looked it, I think, at the weekend. There was a really poor showing from Harvey Barnes. And if he is injured, I hope it's not a serious one, because I really think we do need him, because I do think he's got goals in him and he can turn games that are slipping away from us, and that will come again. But I just really think that Barnes has to show more. As Dazzler says, Barnes is really good, but I agree, Chris, he needs to be playing. He does need to be playing, absolutely. I like Coffee's also in the house. Good to see you. I had a coffee with a bit of Jacob Murphy style there. Now let's get into my favorite subject at the moment. We're going to talk about the boy wonder himself, Lewis Miley, or Louis Miley, whatever you want to call him. I call him fucking class. That's what I call him. So allow me a second, Mark, to wax lyrically about this young superstar. He broke onto the scene last season. You and I both said, wow, what a player. There's certain players that you see, they always say, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And this kid come onto the scene last year at 17 years old, gangly looking kid. But the minute the ball got to his foot, you thought, wow, look at the touch. Look at the composure, look at the time. And then he started threading through balls through the likes of Alexander Isak, setting Joe Linton up against Paris Saint-Germain. He's tackling Mbappe like he's playing five-a-side. He's winning midfield battles with Kobe Mainoo, who the whole mainstream media were trying to make the next fucking Steven Gerrard, I think, when you were listening to them talk. And he got better and better and better. And unfortunately for Louis, it was probably a lot of senior football at a very young age, and injuries caught up on him. And he ended up getting injured playing for England. And he's went away in the summer. He's been away for practically a year. He goes away in the summer, and I don't know whether he's bought the Joe Linton DVD of how to be a fucking beast in the summer, because the kid comes back and he seems to have packed on God knows how much muscle. He looks like he could have a red cape and fly to work with his Superman hairdo. I mean, credit the stylist as well. They've got a hold of old Louis Miley, and his poor mother's basin cut is long gone. I think he's in the old style game now. But as a specimen of a lad, he's massive, isn't he, Mark? He looks so big, so strong, and we were worried about him last season, getting knocked off the ball and stuff like that. But what I loved about his performance, I will let you come in a minute, I promise I will stop praising this young lad in a second. But what I loved about his performance, he started in the number 6 position that Tonali's been so brilliant at. And he was a bit weak in the tackle to start with, but you could see he got pissed off that he made the mistake. And he then went on and grabbed the game by the balls, and he sorted the first half out for us. That strike, Mark, is as good as you'll see from a 27-year-old, 30-year-old professional. I thought he was absolutely brilliant at the weekend in every aspect of his game. And when Bruno came on, him and Miley just clicked. Almost like him and Tonali do. They're on that level where they both trust each other enough with the ball, with the weight of pass, giving it to them when they've got men on them. I just thought he was brilliant, Mark. And how anybody could argue that Sean Longstaff should have a place ahead of this kid in the squad, I'm sorry. There ain't no evidence for that anymore, mate, for me. There really is not.
Yeah, I mean, he's just overall ability is he's like streets ahead of Longstaff now, I think.
Miles.
If you take you talked about his stats at the weekend, 133 touches, 110 out of 117 passes. Yes, the caveat, the little asterisk in there is, yes, it's against Bromley, but Bromley battled well. But I like the way that he put himself about. That initial one with the goal, yes, it comes from him probably not being strong enough in that challenge. But within minutes, he'd gone and clattered somebody just to get it out. I think almost to get it out of his system and go, do you know what? Yeah, I might be 18 years old. I'm 19 years old, but I'm going to go and assert myself on this game. I'm not going to.
I'm not going to go hiding. He didn't go hiding.
No, exactly. And for a young player, you find that sometimes that happens. They make a mistake and the confidence goes and they make mistakes and they're not willing to get on the ball. Total opposite for Miley. He was willing to just take control, and his movement around the pitch is brilliant. And I've said that an awful lot last year. His just ability just to find those little areas and to pick up space to find a pass. The second half, the first half in particular, Newcastle had the ball down the right, and he would just drift into those little pockets in the midfield, just off Kieran Trippier, who got himself forward. And the Bromley players were finding it difficult to kind of work to either approach the ball or come and block him. And as soon as he got the ball was being pinged off. And where I criticised the likes of Almiron before for their ability to pass the ball, especially when it was going to the left-hand side, Miley's weight of pass is perfect. And he was hitting it 5 yards closer to a Bromley player than anybody else was, but the weight of ball was so much better that they had no chance of getting to it. And it just set up time and time again. And the ball through, obviously for Asula early on that he plays through. And Asula's unlucky, I think, with that. He just gets caught under him. But he's just, I'm so in awe of him. Even as a kid, just how good he is with the ball at his feet, how confident he is, how calm he gets when there is the press on him. He's just got that quickness of thought just to be able to find the next pass. He's constantly on the look. Unlike other players that have to look at their feet constantly to know where the ball is, he could be looking left hand and pass the ball. He knows instinctively where the ball is, where the next pass is. And he can, you put a message out on the socials yesterday, just the sky's the limit for him. And it really is. And I know people have talked about his lack of pace, but he's got it up here. And he thinks 2 or 3 steps ahead of other players, a little bit like, the likes of Tonali and Bruno. He's right in that bracket.
Absolutely. I mean, the pace thing is an obsession with the modern day game. Everyone thinks pace, but you cannot teach what Louis Miley has, that brain,
No.
that football brain to see things from different angles. I mean, you know, some of the best players that we've ever seen play football in the Premier League. One name that jumps out at me when I see Louis Miley play is Michael Carrick. You know, and I know people say that's a little bit hyperbolic, but Michael Carrick was one of those midfielders who just seemed to have all the time in the world, even when everything around him was going crazy. You know, his touch, his movement. You hear people like Paul Scholes, one of the best midfielders this country's ever produced, say how good Michael Carrick was.
Yeah.
Steven Gerrard, how good Michael Carrick was. Because Michael Carrick was such a good footballer. And he knew 2-3 passes where he was going to go before he even got the ball. He knew it was going to be give and go, 1-2, bang, you're through, goal. And Miley seems to have that already. We heard the joke Bruno said when he said, I was shit when I was 18, you know, Miley's class. And what I loved as well, I loved the senior players, even Elliot Anderson, God bless him, on the Instagram saying how class Miley was, you know, after the goal and stuff like that. And that's another thing as well, that if he can add goals to the game, because we don't have midfielders that shoot on the edge of the box. Even Bruno doesn't do it enough. You know, Tonali's had a couple of goals recently, but our midfielders get the edge of the box and it's pass. They don't shoot enough. That was always a big criticism of John Joe Shelvey. He had that absolute thunder bastard of the strike on him, and he never took a chance. Whereas if Miley's going to say, do you know what, fuck it, give it to me, I'll get some space and I'll have a crack, that gives him even more to his game than he's had before. Trevor's saying Miley has it all, calm, class, never wasteful with the ball, like Gaza, that feeling that he's thinking a few passes ahead of everyone else. Pirlo is one of the best I've ever seen, never any pace. He's absolutely right. You know, I mean, Tonali's got pace. People forget that about Tonali because the Pirlo comparisons with the long hair and the icy cold kind of Italian demeanor. But Tonali's got a bit of speed about him. You can see how he gets around the pitch. Whereas Louis Miley, I honestly think you could put Louis Miley in the midfield three with either Joe Linton and Bruno or Tonali and Bruno, and I don't think he would disgrace himself, Mark. I think he would absolutely show, you know, his quality, his calmness, his ability. And for me, listen, this is not an I hate Sean Longstaff thing, right? Sean Longstaff has had some brilliant games for his football club in the 200 appearances that he's been here. He's scored vital goals. He's gave vital contributions. But this is football. You get to a point in your career where it's either a signing comes in or a young lad comes through the academy and they're just way ahead of you. And it doesn't matter what you do, you just can't catch them up. And I've seen Sean do interviews with Louis Miley, and he's always spoke so highly of him. These players will know how good Louis Miley is. Eddie Howe even said that in a press conference a few weeks ago. They see this young lad in training, Mark. You can't tell me they're not seeing him spraying passes around in training, winning tackles, smashing shots on top corner and going, fucking hell. You know, we better watch what we're doing here. So I just think when you see how good he's been after a year out, as I think Trevor said Roger said in the comments, no rust, Mark. Yes, you got to take the opposition into account, but I honestly think he could play against Wolves on Wednesday and he would still look class and he would control the midfield. I just think he's that good.
No, I agree. So the kind of question, and I think we've said it an awful lot, and it's a cliche now, but we'll say it anyway. If you're good enough, you're old enough, and I don't think, yes, Ty's is worth every penny of his 5K a week wages. That will get bumped up.
That will definitely get increased, I think, 100%, yeah. Especially when he sees what Lloyd Kelly's on. Fuck me.
Well, no, yeah, less about that, the better. But look, I mean, the kind of likeness to him, I get it. The quickness of thought, his readability. I'm just thinking there, and I'm in no way putting him in the same bracket at the moment. But I think there's a very possible route into that for him. Kevin De Bruyne.
I can see that.
In terms of his awareness, you watch Kevin De Bruyne play, and maybe it's not so much recently, but if you go over the last few years, when Kevin De Bruyne plays, Kevin De Bruyne is constantly on the lookout. He's constantly, it's like chess to him. He's
2-3 steps ahead of everybody else, mate. That's what those players are like.
Where every single player is on the pitch. And I've used that comparison really for when you watch Almiron run with the ball, and he's nodding his head to watch the ball. Whereas the players like De Bruyne who are that good, such awareness of where every single player on the pitch is both their own and the opposition. And I think Miley is sort of falling into that bracket where he's just got such an awareness of the game around him. He reads it so well that there's a route to him to get to that level and be in that bracket of one of the best players in the league. And, he's got some work to put in. That's I'm not saying he's there now. He's not the finished article. There are areas of game to improve. There's always that. He's 18. He's got lots of time ahead of him.
He's going to have bad games. He's going to have great games, and I just, But if you look how exciting this is, though, our left back is arguably the best left back in the Premier League right now, and he's 19. Louis Miley's just put in that performance of the weekend, and he's 18. Tino Livramento is in the England squad now regularly, and he's 21. You're looking at, you can almost see the picture being built that we were, just it was talked about when Ashworth was here. Bringing these young talent in. We talked about Dibbling being linked in the transfer window, players like that added to the squad. Players you can get for under 30 million quid. Let this brilliant coach work with them, and then make them better players. I mean, there's nothing to say Newcastle United couldn't be sitting with 4 or 5 of the best players in the starting 11 under the age of 23, in the next 2 or 3 seasons, which is absolutely incredible. But I was so impressed with his mentality. I think that's the thing with Miley that impresses me the most. Yes, the ability, but it's the mentality, Mark. For 18 years old, you saw Will Asula running around like a fucking headless chicken. God bless him. A little, excited lad, getting his goal, but he was just charging around everywhere like a mad thing, as you normally expect from an 18-year-old. Even Steven Gerrard, when he came through at 18, he was flying into tackles like a fucking maniac, if you remember, 2-footed every other week, whereas Louis Miley seems like he looks like a 30-year-old player.
Yeah.
You look at his face, and he's got the face of a boy and then he's got the body of a man, and he just seems to be playing like he's got 100 caps for England or something like that. And you think, how the fuck is he that calm? And I think, as the guy said it before, he's been to the Parc des Princes, he's been to Old Trafford, he's been to Stamford Bridge. He's played against some of the biggest teams in Europe. It didn't faze him at all. And that kind of mentality for an 18-year-old, he's massive credit to his mum and dad as well, to be fair, because they've obviously kept his head on his shoulders. But that to me is a kid who has something even more special in his talent, and that is the right mentality. You saw it with the likes of David Beckham and Paul Scholes and Gerrard and Lampard and all these players who made it from young ages. You have to have that mentality, and I think this kid has it. And I'm so excited to see what he can do. There is definitely going to be a shuffle around in our midfield, but we'll get into the transfers in a second. But in terms of where Miley ranks now in the midfield, Mark, before we get into the transfers, I mean, for me, you've got your main midfield 3. You've got Bruno Tonali and Joe Linton. And for me, Louis Miley's chomping at their heels to get in. He's the first one out of the 3, outside of the 3, to come in if there's a suspension or injury, in my opinion. Am I being hyperbolic there after one performance against Bromley, or am I right?
Maybe. And I still think it's situational, because at the moment, and you're right, look, he hasn't looked out of place when he's played in the Parc des Princes. He hasn't looked out of place when he's played against Chelsea, and he's made £100 million midfielders look bang average as well. Let's put it that way. So not only does he look not look out of place in those places, he is shone above those established players in those sides. I do think that it's situational. I think he's almost perfect to come in and take the place of Bruno or Tonali if one of those is injured. I'm not so sure that he's the one to come in and take Joe Linton's place.
I wouldn't say that either, no. But that's Willock, and I've got a big worry about Willock, which I'll come on in a second. But I get what you said. Yeah. Bruno and Tonali, yes, because he has similar traits with the way he uses the ball and the way he can sit deep and those kind of things. I agree with you on that.
If you're looking for pure sort of box to box, then I think Willock is the ideal replacement in terms of for Joe Linton. There's an argument to suggest that even Sean to come in and do a little bit of that work as well. If you're looking for donkey work, if you're looking for the pure like press, that sort of thing, if it's ability on the ball that you want, then he's streets ahead of the others. He really is. I'm not entirely sure if you dropped into a 2. you could play Tonali and Miley alongside each other and push Bruno a little bit further forward and have him as the sort of central eight.
It would free him up, I think, a lot, because those two would use the ball so well. I do agree with that.
Absolutely right. So there are ways around that to bring him in, and even like we know Joe Linton loves a yellow card, so he's never far from a suspension. But yeah, I think there's definitely games where I'm not sure it would suit him particularly, and depending on who's gone out. But certainly, if it's Tonali or Bruno that's stepping out because they've got a knock or they are suspended, then he's the first one I'm calling on for it, because he's shown that he can play in that position, and he's the best user of the football probably outside of those two. He's not equal to those two.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Phil's saying that's the biggest issue with Miley is where to play him. I think because he's so young and he's shown he can create and he can sit deep now as well, which is very, very interesting, and he can score goals. I mean, I've seen some people say we should loan him out a championship club. Not for me at all. Not for me in the slightest. No chance.
No.
Not when he's streets ahead of the two underneath him. And that kind of takes us into the transfer talk as well, Mark, because there seems to be more talk about outgoings than incomings for Newcastle. There's been a few little cheeky things going on in terms of shares coming and all this sort of stuff. But Kieran Maguire, obviously we had in the channel, was very much saying it was to pay for previous spend, not current spend or future spend. But there's a lot of talk about Miguel Almiron going in the next few days, potentially to free up money in the transfer market. There's loads of players that we've been linked to previously appear to have suddenly had much lower fees than reported in the summer, like Mark Gahey for 40 million quid rather than 70 million quid.
Shock.
But yeah, exactly. Shock horror. But there's loads of names being thrown around there, But again, what frustrates me, is we know we need a right winger. You see Villa signing the lad from Dortmund today, for a brilliant fee. In my opinion, he causes a lot of trouble in the Champions League. Good player. And you start to think, what is Newcastle's plan? We're talking about Almiron being sold. It'll be buttons if he does. The Dubravka deal, obviously that's smart to try and stop that, because he's been so good deputising for Pope that you'd be stupid to get rid of him while Pope still isn't back to full fitness, and we don't know how good he'll be when he comes back anyway, But, in terms of someone like Lewis Miley, he'll save us money in the transfer market, because we don't potentially need to go and buy another midfielder. But the concern for me, Mark, is there's players in the squad. We don't know how bad Barnes' injury is. Wilson, again, people say he may be fit soon. Yeah, sure thing. I'll believe that when I fucking see it. That's like saying that Margot Robbie's going to be Margot Robbie's going to be in the next What's Going On. There's probably more chance of that than fucking Wilson coming on the pitch.
I have a feeling our significant others may have an issue with that, to be fair.
Hey, well, whatever, mate. If Margot Robbie wants to come on, she's more than welcome. She knows a lot about football. Her and Sydney Sweeney. But, that is not – there's more chance of that happening than Wilson being fit, is my point. And what worries me about Joe Willock is, if anything does happen to that midfield three, this whole team has a big problem, because once you break up that midfield three, who the hell goes in and plays? Yes, we're talking about how great Lewis Miley is, but if anything happens to Joe Linton, for example, we don't have the cover. Willock's injured again. Every time Willock seems to come back, he makes a run and he goes down holding something, ankles, shins, hamstrings, whatever, and it really pisses me off with how injury prone these players have become. And I just feel like we haven't been ruthless enough to move them on, because Wilson and Willock would have fetched a decent fee for the pair of them. Maybe last season, last summer, potentially we could have sold the pair of them on, got some good money to reinvest. And we're not very good at selling our as a club. And can you see us getting anybody in? The centre half should be linked to, ironically, for 25 million, and I'll go to City apparently for 50 million. That tells you everything you need to know. But do you think Newcastle are going to strengthen this window, Mark? Or are you starting to think there's a real chance that we'll just move players on and not bring anyone in?
There's definitely, I think there's a thought that will happen, because it's whether, you've got to be really lucky with injuries for the rest of the season. If you're not going to bring anybody else in, you're going to allow players to leave. I think the key is all those players, were they going to play any significant time? No, and the likes of Almiron, no, he's not going to play any significant time, even if Murphy loses form, because they will move around. They'll put Barnes out there. They'll put Gordon out there, and I don't think there's any worry in terms of him going from the squad. If you then start to look at, well, does Sean move on in this window? I don't think it will, but I don't think he will. But
I wouldn't rule it out completely, though. If somebody was going to give you money for him, I wouldn't rule it out.
A decent offer, but then you have to go and replace. You have to go and get somebody else to come into the squad that comes in, because all of a sudden you are limited. Because if you lose two, and we saw it last year, because Bruno was out, and then obviously Tonali being out, and then, either Bruno or Joe Linton then go out, all of a sudden you lose two, and you don't have Longstaff in there.
Yeah, that's true.
You're then reliant on a midfield that is sort of one of the current three, potentially, plus Miley, plus Willock. Now, there's an argument to suggest that could then be a little bit lightweight, depending on who it is that's gone out. So, and if you were to lose both Bruno and Tonali for any time because they're both banned at once, or one gets injured and one's banned, then it becomes a real issue, because the lack of ball-playing ability in that midfield, you then suddenly rely on just Louis Miley, because Willock and Joe Linton aren't going to play that role for you. So if you let him go, you have to take into consideration somebody to then come in and fill that void in the squad. Others, the Dubravka one,
Striker's the big one, Mark. Just people have mentioned Jonathan David, who's free in the summer, and you get him for a knockdown in January. There's been talk about Newcastle being interested. Are we not looking at a centre forward? I know Willis Sula scored a good goal at the weekend, but are we not looking at a good centre forward, mate, to come in? Because Wilson's not going to come back, is he? Surely, man.
I think the difficulty for any, and particularly that level of striker, is they're looking at the squad going, who's ahead of me? A little bit like Barnes, the whole Barnes situation. Does Jonathan David want to come in and have a fight for first team football? Or the obvious choice for him, I guess, right now would be to go, there's a club down south that doesn't have a striker because, well, they haven't got a striker because they sold their only centre forward in the summer and didn't replace him and haven't replaced him, and it's their biggest problem. And we know it's been their biggest problem for the last 4 years, but still haven't done anything about it. If he's looking,
aren't they signing Isak though? Aren't they signing Isak for 150 million?
I thought he was already there. No,
I thought he was there as well.
So I think that the difficulty with him is I think he may look at it and go, I'm not going to come and play second fiddle to Alexander Isak. He's going to go and want to play somewhere where he's guaranteed first team football like he is now. He's a fantastic footballer. He's a great forward. But I just, as good as he would be to come into the squad, I just don't see it, because I just don't think he will want to come and play second fiddle.
That's a great comment from Mr. J. If I was Newcastle, I would be talking to Delap right now, because if Ipswich are going to go down, I'd be trying to get him tied up in the summer. I would be flirting to get him done now, because, I don't want it, but let's just say Isak does go in the summer. That kid to me looks like he's really something special, Liam Delap. And if we do sign him for relative pittance, really, 25 million quid or something like that, 30 million quid even, right? Could he come in that Newcastle team and be the player, that we all think he probably can be, because he's getting goals at Ipswich with literally next to no service. What could he do with people like Bruno and Tonali and Louis Miley threading through balls to him?
I mean, he's got kind of every attribute going as a proper, like, complete centre forward. He's big, he's strong, he's good in the air.
We slept on that for me, Mark. That should have been the signing, not Sula. That should have been the signing.
No, I get that argument. I said to you before, I just don't think Newcastle get the same deal that or accept the same deal that Ipswich took. Ipswich were willing to bring him in given how good he was, but there are huge caveats in that contract in terms of City will have a buyback fee, City will have a sell-on clause, they'll have a low enough clause in there that if they suddenly decide, actually, we need another centre forward to come back, we can buy him back for almost exactly the same amount of money that he cost. The consideration for going for him now is, do City have first refusal? because if suddenly they are going to accept something in the region of 30 to 40 million from City, could come and go, well, we'll match it and we'll take him back. And then,
can you see that though? Can you see that?
I mean, there are talks that they're looking at another striker to come in and back up Haaland. So that would, I guess, that would almost inevitably rule that out. If they were to bring in someone from, I think, oh, I've forgotten the lad's name that they were looking at. But that would kind of rule that, because Delap's not going to want to go back and be third choice striker at City. He's happy getting his game time. He's happy getting goals. He's looking good in a side that is struggling, and he's still managing to show himself. And I just think that sort of complete forward would be great. Marmoush, that's the guy. Thank you, Sean. He's just
the next Mo Salah, as they all call him.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'd completely forgotten. Ian's dropped it in there as well. So thank you for my brain wasn't working.
Dibbling is a great shout. For that right wing, I think he could be excellent for us. He scored a couple of goals in the cup as well the weekend. But yeah, I mean, the right wing. Everyone keeps saying the right wing is the position, and it does stand to reason. All this talk about Miggy Almiron moving on, it does stand to reason that infamous right wing that's caused us so many problems. And there's a few people saying, why don't we get a right winger who can play through the middle as well at times? Maybe, somebody who plays down south for a team called Brentford possibly might be the player. I think would be a wise move. What's his name again? We've never talked about him.
Do you have anyone in particular in mind, Christopher? That was oddly specific. Brian Mbeumo, yes.
Oh, look at that. Dean is right there with the comment. He read my mind, Dean. He can play right or central. He would be perfect for us. If they want 50 or 60 million quid for him, right? Like I say, pay the fucking bill. Pay the money, because if you get that guy on our right-hand side and that front three with Gordon, Isak, listen, Murphy's done really well, right? But if you got Mbeumo in there as well, he'll have to earn his place in the team. He can't just walk straight in, but I'm pretty sure if you started with Murphy and then you give that lad the chance, I think once he got in, he would never look back. I think he would have that spot nailed down, because he's a better footballer than Jacob Murphy. He scores goals, he creates, he's dangerous, he's Premier League proven. And, it's looking very likely we're going to get possibly Champions League football, if not guaranteed European football. And then Mbeumo will want to test himself at that level as well. So surely, we would appeal to him as a club to sign. We could get up his wages as well. And if Newcastle don't do anything else this window, Mark, I could understand the centre-half thing taking a backseat, because Botman's back and he looks brilliant. Dan Burn has obviously been superb this season. Fabian Schär is back from suspension now. I don't know how far Lascelles is away. Kraft's back, who can play centre-half as well. I can understand why they wouldn't bother with a Mark Guehi or something like that. If you got 60 million quid that you think you can spend on a player, go fucking spend it on Brian Mbeumo, mate. Just sort it out. Get it done.
Yeah. We don't often bring up anything from any of the other sites that are there, but I just wanted to share the FB stuff. I'm just gonna zoom in slightly to this.
Oh, there we go. For us poorly sighted individuals like myself, Mark. Yes, thank you very much.
City gigs on.
Yeah,
so
they're on.
Mbeumo's 4 years in the Premier League. I mean, he's played 118 games in the Premier League. He scored 35 goals and had 24 assists. Compare that with the right-hand side that Newcastle have had for the last 4 or 5 years. And possibly harshly, I include the argument, the season that that Murphy's having, because he's been great this season. But Mbeumo is he's so consistent. He's so dynamic. He's great on penalties. So there's another tick in the box. I mean, they haven't missed a beat from Tony leaving in that regard. He links so well with the centre forward. And I think Johan Visser is another great one as well. If you could,
I'd get the fucking
Jesus Christ, if you could buy both of them.
Oh my God,
it'd be unbelievable business. But I just think he is the perfect shout for that position at the moment. I think the worry from a lot of people's point of view, I mean, he's only 25, so he's the same age as the likes of Botman and places. So there's plenty of time ahead of him. I think the worry for a lot of this season is the fact that Salah's announced that he's leaving, and
Yes.
that automatically links Liverpool with him because of his goal return from that side of the field. But there's going to come a point where he really needs to move on from Brentford. That's not being disrespectful to Brentford, but he'll want to take a step up. Because they're not going to challenge for the Champions League at any point soon, I don't think. So he needs probably to make that step up and take that challenge on. And I'm just thinking that level of consistency from that side when you then have a level of consistency in Gordon from the other side with Alexander Isak up front. And even my mouth's watering at the prospect of those three going at teams, because that could be devastating.
Wow. I mean, Felix is saying there they only paid $6.5 million for Mbeumo. I mean, that is business, is it not? Wow. I mean, a lot of people are saying how Mitchell said we can't afford ready-made players anymore. So you start thinking about the likes of Bakayoko, which George is happy with. We covered Bakayoko in the rumour has it. And, this is a big test for Mitchell, I think, to reach into that big black book of transfer and contacts that he has across Europe. Go and find us these brilliant players that people will go, who's he? And then all of a sudden he hits the Premier League, and they go, holy shit, And then Sky Sports go, I tell you what, he'd be great for Man United or he'd be great for Arsenal, in a couple of weeks when he's playing brilliant for Newcastle, because that's generally what they seem to do these days. But for me, I just think that right-hand side is so undercooked for Newcastle. And that's no disrespect to Murphy, because he's been excellent since he's come back into the team. But, that right-hand side has been an issue for two and a half years now, probably since Howe's been in the job, arguably. He got great moments out of Miggy Almiron. They were long since gone. And Vincent says there, the Bakayoko rumours are dying down. You can take that one of two ways, Vincent. Either that's good or it's bad. But I know PSV were very reluctant to sell him, Mark, weren't they, in terms of his value to the team.
I always like that some of the best business gets done when there's no information about it whatsoever. Some of the best transfers that have ever come about, there's been nothing about it. And you can have all the rumors, all the ITKs that love to get involved and create all their own bullshit. But the better ones are usually the ones that nobody knows about. And I'd rather there not be those rumors if I'm if my team's looking for players, because one, it then maybe doesn't alert others to if they've not been looking, all of a sudden it's such and such is interested in, and then others go, hang on, we'll take a look at him. And
look at City. Look at City. 2 or 3 defenders we've been linked to, all of a sudden City are signing them.
And look, they've got their net far and wide, and they'll be looking at those players anyway. But you want as little getting out of, and this is why none of the ITK stuff I pay any attention to anyway, because there isn't a single Premier League club that wants any of their information getting out to anybody through any means, because the fact that then it can cause problems in the market for players and agents then being able to go, well, X club is looking at it, so then YZ then come in because the news has got out. None of them want any of that. It's all bullshit. Absolute bullshit.
And Howe certainly doesn't play into that. A couple of comments from John earlier that were just marked to come back up. So he's just saying, lads, any thoughts on why the club hasn't maximised our sponsorship on the training ground and kit? Even St James's Park, apparently we're struggling again with PSR. Our turnover is £37 million down because of the Champions League. And he's saying that Riyadh Air are going to be putting 40 million in Atletico Madrid for sponsorship and name rights. I think I did ask Kieran these kind of questions, didn't I, on the episode that we did with Kieran. And he said to me off camera as well, that Newcastle are probably going to be all right, I think, even though they've been losing money, because that's probably because of our inactivity in the transfer window. And obviously we had the Champions League money coming in and everything else as well. But I think it is disappointing. We've said this before, Mark. It's disappointing, where the Saudis have got all these brilliant commercial deals going around the world. We don't seem to have any of this coming this way. And I think that commercial team definitely has some questions to answer. I mean, they're all waxing lyrically about the about the stack and all the other stuff, and all that, which is great. You'll pat in the back, lads. But where's the training ground? Where's the sponsorship? Where's the revenue being pumped into the club? And do you think it's just because Newcastle again are under that microscope even more so than anyone else, and that's why they don't dare, go down that avenue.
Well, I think that the latest sort of probably delaying things like that was the whole associated party transaction rules that they won't have wanted to do anything around then, purely and simply because they don't want to be the one that gets collared on it. But look, there are things. Yes, training ground sponsorship, training kit sponsorship, jacket sponsors. Do you know what I mean? There's all those sorts of things that you can do. Stadium sponsorship's not going to be the case at the moment, but that would maybe come with a new ground. The higher that Newcastle maintain their average position in the league, the more money that will come in anyway, in terms of sponsorship. So if suddenly Newcastle get Champions League again for next season, the sponsorship that will come in on the back of that, because then it's two Champions League seasons within 3, it starts to become a regular thing. More and more sponsors are willing to throw more and more money because there's more exposure. And with the Champions League now, with there being more games, with it having changed, the format having changed, so I think more of that will come. It has been a little frustrating, especially when you see the likes of Atletico able to get that sort of sponsorship deal from an associate party to Newcastle, and it does seem daft. And when you look at some of the things where even the transfers as well, you mentioned this before about transfers of players going from rival clubs to Saudi, and they're PIF owned clubs that are putting the money into these. It does seem a little backward thinking in that regards. I know they're trying to build their own league, but when you've got an asset such as Newcastle and you're trying to build them into the best that they can possibly be, to then hamper them by giving your rivals copious amounts of cash, or
there's a problem
for players or for sponsorship, it does seem daft. But
it's by design for me. By the Premier League market, it's by design. They want the Saudis to get bored, so they try and make it very difficult for them to do anything, to invest in all this stuff. So that they want the Saudis to be bored and fuck off, and Newcastle go back to the mid-table mediocrity that the Premier League believes that we should be sitting in. But as I said, there's a huge test for Mitchell in this window. I thought it was harsh when he was judged when he came in the summer, because he only just came in. It was a mess upstairs. It was a bit harsh to judge him, but I think with this window, he's had time at the club. He's had time to look around. He's had time to get the scouts out there and look at other situations, in the world of player transfers and all that sort of stuff. And it's okay signing these brilliant players for the future, but there's 3 key positions in our team, our squad, that needs to be filled. And I think for me, right wing is massive this window. The centre back, like I say, I can do without. Right wing and probably a centre forward. I think if you go out in the market, you've probably got opportunity to do it. Some people are saying they're waiting for the City court case. I think that is the answer to that. In when's that meant to be? Is it meant to be at the end of the season or something?
Is it March?
March?
It was supposed to be before the end of the season.
Oh, well, we'll find out in March. Possibly, if City get off with those charges or get a minimal, because I did watch Kieran on the overlap, and I don't normally agree with some of the stuff those guys say, or most of the stuff that they say. There was a massive hole of Newcastle fan missing from that whole situation, to be fair. But when they were talking about that, they were saying the City aren't being found guilty of 150 charges. It's 3 major charges lobbied at their owners. And if obviously they breach those 3 major charges, then they'll throw the book at them. But if they find them guilty, say, for 2 of those 3 charges, and they don't throw the book at them and they give them a 10-point fine or 12-point fine or even a 15-point fine, right? Then that almost opens the door for someone like Newcastle to go, well, we can have a minor breach and we can swallow that and we can get on with that. Then maybe they can go and add 2 or 3. But the mad thing is, Mark, we're only missing, I think, about 3 really good additions to that squad. The right-sided centre-half, the right winger, and a backup centre-forward. And if you get those 3 filled, and they don't have to be 100 million quid a piece, Yes, and Bremo would cost you maybe it's about 50 million, 60 million quid. But you get yourself a good right-sided centre-half. Tomori's available. AC Milan's a great shout for, what is he, 40 million, 30 million or something like that? You could do a real good deal with him on that one. There's a great centre-half that could play for years with Sven Botman alongside of him, and then you've got Jonathan David, who they've already said is on a free in the summer, could be next to nothing, in terms of a nominal fee to buy him in January. There's 3 really good players there Newcastle could buy without going nuts and tipping the PSR scale upside down. And I just want to know what's slowing them down, mate. What's keeping them from doing it?
The other thing about David is that transfer fee may be minimal now, and he's obviously going to be free in the summer. The wages,
then you got the wages, and the bonus, all that stuff.
I think you're probably looking at £250,000-300,000 a week.
Yeah. Then everyone else wants an increase.
So you do have that problem. I think, there's a couple of signings in this window that I think would really need to be.
Do we need a keeper? Just quickly while you're pondering, do we need a keeper?
Look, if Dubravka leaves, yes, because they clearly don't trust the Greek. You're not gonna. I refuse to say his name because every time I say his name, I just want to say Vlachodimos and Pliers, and I know that.
Well, say Vlachodimos and Pliers. Tease me.
Every time I say it,
was that Vlachodimos and Pliers?
I just want to say it. They obviously don't. They don't trust him. Otherwise, he would have been playing in the cup. But I don't think Pope's the answer. And I've seen some proper arguments going on social media over the last sort of 48 hours over Dubravka versus Pope. And I mean, at the moment, I don't think there's a fair argument because I think Dubravka's been all right. He's much more calm with his feet. I panic. Like, you know me, I'm normally the biggest member of the goalkeeper union going.
Yeah.
I panic like crazy the second that ball goes back to Nick Pope and he's got the ball at his feet because his touch is horrendous. His passing is awful. Dubravka's just that little bit more calm. Yeah, he's not a long-term answer. If you could argue to keep him to the end of the season, I think that's a good bit of business. I don't think a deal beyond that, which then might put him back into him leaving. I don't think you can give an extended contract for him because you have to be looking to then move on from him next year. He's 35, 36. Is he now, Dubravka? He's a little bit older.
Yeah, he's no spring. He's no spring chicken. I mean, people got to remember Dubravka is at a very up and down, topsy-turvy time at Newcastle, and he's only just kind of come back into the fore, and credit to him for that with Nick Pope's injuries. But, names being linked. I mean, Stephen's saying there, the French guy, is it Chevalier? I've not come across him yet, Stephen, but I know that Trafford's been linked heavily. Ramsdale has been linked as well. I know you're very, about Ramsdale a little bit, I still think there's a keeper in there. I still think there's a good keeper in there. I think he needs to calm down a little bit. I think he's a little bit crazy. I know all keepers are crazy, but Ramsdale is just a special type of crazy. So I think if he calmed down a bit, I think he could be an excellent goalkeeper. I don't rate Trafford. Me and you differ on that as well. Kelleher, Liverpool, for me, is the one I would be going for in the summer. If you can keep Dubravka till the summer and you sign Kelleher, there's your replacement for Pope. That's the way I would do it. But it'd be interesting to see if the club are moving that way. That's the thing. If we don't get players out, then there'll be no one in. That's what made us breach last June. They should have sold them. I totally agree with Dazzle on that one. I said that to Kieran in the video that for me, I think we've held on to players a little bit too long in terms of Eddie's loyalty to the players. And Kieran said it wasn't a negative thing, and I get where he was coming from. But I think in football, sometimes it can hurt you. If those players continuously perform out of their skin, then fair enough. But Wilson has been the invisible man for a long period of time now. Joe Willock is vastly joining him as the invisible boy alongside them. Together they fight crime and no fucker sees them. That's the disappearing duo is what they are, the pair of them. And you can't afford to have two key members of your squad so unfit all the time. you just can't have it. We've been linked to the likes of Angel Gomez, who's a really good player, box to box. He could be a great Willock replacement in the squad. Jonathan David could fill in that Wilson role. And I think the time is coming for the club to just maybe get a little bit ruthless with some of these lads and say, listen, you've given us great times. It's time to go and move them on and transfer list them. Because, listen, people will buy Joe Willock. People will buy Callum Wilson because there's still a player there if you can get them fit, but it's a big if. If you put, and I'm not saying they will be in the championship, if you put those two in the championship, Mark, they would fucking piss it. The pair of them are the best players in the league. But there'd be a lot of Premier League teams would take a gamble on Joe Willock because if you can get him fit, there's 10, 12 goals a season there if you play him as an attacking midfielder.
Yeah, Wilson's out of contract, isn't he, at the end of the season? So he's released rather than...
There's a rumour that the club have an option to extend. They'd be fucking mad to do that.
Look, he's cheap. And that's the caveat. He's on. I think he's only on 40 grand a year. So as a squad player, 40 grand a year for an extra season is not a bad thing. It also gives you a little bit of a sellable sort of asset. You're not going to get much.
It is when
he hasn't
he's not fit 60%. 60% of the season he's not fit. What's the point of having him? It's like having a Ferrari that you can't fucking drive. 10 months of the year. Do you know what I mean? What's the point?
Yeah, it's like those ones where you buy, you can only drive at a track day and only when they say you're able to. It's just ridiculous. Yeah, Wilson I wouldn't give a new deal to. I would thank him for his service and move him on. But you're right. The ruthlessness has to come. The lack of ability to move players on at the right. It's still hampering it. The fact that Isaac Hayden's still got a year left on his contract at the end of this season is absolutely mind-boggling. And nothing against Isaac Hayden, and that's the deal that he was given by previous regime. But it's staggering that players like that are still at the club.
It is frightening.
It's ridiculous. But the ones that need to kind of move, the likes of Miggy, the likes of Matt Targett probably needs to move on. The 17 goalkeepers that I think Wilson
they were all shit
to move on.
They were all shit rather than one or two.
This is where Newcastle have to get about, and I think by starting to bring in the younger players, the likes of Asula, the likes of the
Hall, Tino, those kind of
players. Those players that have age on this, the Botmans, even the likes of Bruno and so like, they've still got lots of time on their side. An awful lot of the squad is players that are hitting 30 plus that are really difficult to kind of be able to make any money on and have no sell-on value. This was always a problem with managers in the past. The likes of Martin O'Neill loved an old player. But the problem with bringing in those old players, you then can't move them on. So he struggled when whether he was at Leicester and then onwards from there. That it's great bringing them in, but as soon as you try and replace them, it costs you a fortune. You don't bring any of that money back into the club, and that's not what you want to get into. You want these young players that can either be a first-team asset or a sellable asset, and be the next Yankuba Minda. You may never see them, and they may look brilliant, but if it's a means to an end where you can bring them in for 5 or 6 million and sell them for 30. This is the way that Newcastle has to get to. That they have to start being really ruthless in the way that they develop their own strategies in the transfer market.
Absolutely, and I must just say, George, I don't encourage you to breach FFP or PSR, but if there's a Five Guys on the go, mate, you fucking breach that, mate, because that is a tasty burger. It's worth the cost, especially if you've had a crap hotel meal, which I know all too well when I'm ever more on tour with my day job, mate. You get that Five Guys. Get on, mate. Do you know what? Well, I would have done if I couldn't have claimed it on my work expenses because it was too expensive. I'm only joking. No, it is a lovely burger. I don't know if it's just because you tell yourself it's a lovely burger. I don't know. But
you have to for the price. I think they go for. Wow. I think you have
honestly,
to.
Mate,
I will enjoy this.
I had one in Leeds. I was out with a customer in Leeds, and I had one in Leeds, and this homeless guy came in. He went, "Can you spare a burger, mate?" And I says, "Not for fucking 40-odd quid for two of them, mate." I says, "You can fuck right off." I says, "You must be joking, pal." So yeah, that's a story for another day. But yeah, I'm a bit depressed with the transfer talk. Let's move on to the fun part of the night, which is Out of Toon. We'll finish up the show with this one. If those of you who just joined us for the first time tonight, this is where we talk about things that have happened outside of Newcastle United. It's the FA Cup weekend, loads of stuff going on, and we are going to start a little bit close to home, a little bit further down the water, a little bit away to somewhere that's maybe not as cosmopolitan as Newcastle, somewhere that's not as nice as Newcastle, somewhere where the stadium is not as full as Newcastle, and that's down the road at the Sad Mackham Bastards. So they played, I think it was Stoke, in the FA Cup at the weekend, and this was the state of their stadium. Not only was it hilariously empty, but also this is what they then paraded their new top signing from Rome, I think it is, in front of. Name escapes me now, but he must have come out there and said, "Well, when did the fans come in?" Because that is absolutely abysmal. And this was a great tweet from Daily NUFC. So Leeds United played Harrogate Town, a local derby, but miles apart, sold out. We played Bromley, sold out. Liverpool played Accrington Stanley. Who are they? Sold out. Brentford, say that's an age thing. Young people won't get that. Our listeners will. Brentford played Plymouth, sold out. Chelsea Morecambe, sold out. Forest Luton, sold out. Man City Salford, sold out. No excuse for this. You sad Mackham bastards. The only thing I can think of is that Nissan put on loads of overtime this weekend, and they've all had to get it because they want cheesy chips. And cheesy chips have gone up with inflation, and that's the reason they were at the ground, mate. That's pitiful, isn't it? Pitiful by the way.
It really is. On that picture, I genuinely wish I'd been the one to think of changing that from "Where the lads" to "Where's the lads."
Where's the lads? Where's the lads?
Yeah. I mean, what was it? 15,000, I think. I mean, yeah. Christ Almighty! It's just, and look,
terrible.
I think when had they been at the absolute pits of despair, which I guess if you were in Sunderland, you might be, but if they were languishing at the bottom of the league and not in a good run of form and all that stuff, you there's an argument to say that people don't enjoy going. They might stay away. But this whole resurgence under whatever his name is, Regislav, whatever, I can't remember his name. The fact that they're parading a new signing in Enzo Lafi, weirdly was linked a couple of times to Newcastle, I think. About 12 months ago, gone to Italy, hasn't really cut the mustard there, and they're lauding him. I think BBC Sport put on something about, is he the best signing in the Championship? Well, I refer you back to Wolves a few seasons ago when they brought in a couple of Portuguese players. Now, I suggest you go back and look at them because I think they are worlds ahead of them.
I think a certain Matt Ritchie signing for Newcastle the Championship was probably the best transfer that the Championship had ever seen, my friend. But yeah, it is debatable. But there was some great proper FA Cup ties at the weekend, and none better than Tamworth and Spurs. The Spurs had an absolute mare getting over the line in, but it was brilliant. Some of the stuff was this was absolutely brilliant. There was a gap in the net, so the Tamworth striker, Bekray Anori, was hoisted by his teammates to get some tape. I mean, that's proper football in that market. That's the kind of stuff we used to do at Boys Club, mate. This is brilliant. This is an FA Cup tie. I love it.
School football over again. We have to go and put the nets up pre-game and parade somebody on their shoulders to try and
then you blast the ball at everyone trying to put it up and knock them off the shoulders.
Yeah, I was disappointed that wasn't going on. Quickly, while we're talking about Tamworth players as well, they pick up that Chris Ray was playing for them, who was the son of Chris Ray, who played for Arsenal.
Chris Rea hasn't driven home for Christmas.
No, Chris Rea. W-R-E-A.
Not
Chris Rea. Well, that reminds me of the joke one of the lads at work told me that Chris Rea is going to be the new front man of Dire Straits.
Diarrhea. Oh dear. That is a dad joke. That's a dad joke I've ever heard one, mate.
I'm going.
Yeah. Time, get your cool, mate, get your cool. But yeah, I must admit something else that was really funny in that game. Obviously, apart from Spurs being absolutely shit, was that Ange Postecoglou, when the Tamworth fans were chatting, I think they were just chatting wanker, just consistently at him, wanker. And Ange turned around. I know Ange can rub people the wrong way, but he turned around and smiled and started doing the old conductor fingers for the chat. And then the Tamworth fans just started laughing. And obviously a bit of respect there. So that was a great job by Ange.
That was, but because he stood there and he had that typical Postecoglou scowl on his face. And then he just broke into the smile, and that instantly broke the Tamworth fans that were chanting it. And they all cracked up and laughed. He starts to orchestrate it. Brilliant. Very well.
It was good. To coin saying the road to hell. Yes, that's the drive to Sunderland. To coin, that is exactly right, mate. Well said. But moving back onto some of the more FA Cup action at the weekend, the big tie was obviously Manchester United and Arsenal. Manchester United won on penalties, and Mark, as the Evermore goalkeeper, I mean, what in the holy fuck was David Raya doing with this penalty? By the way, I mean, if you hadn't seen this, we can't put the video up for obvious YouTube copyright reasons, but this has got to be the worst piece of goalkeeping I think I've ever fucking seen in my life. He was practically off getting a bovril in the fucking pie when the lad took the shot. What was he doing?
I mean, if you look at that, I can't remember who it was that's taking the penalty. His foot's backwards. His foot's not even it's horizontal to the floor.
Yeah.
And Raya is already gone. So by the time he strikes the ball, he's gone. He's practically on the floor. It's the worst bit of goalkeeping a penalty shoot I think I've ever seen. It's so bizarre. It's just ridiculous. Honestly, if that's my team and that's my goalkeeper that's doing that, I'm going absolutely bizarre. I'm having one of your rants. About that, because you may as well just stand on one side and just fucking roll it in, mate. Do you know I'm not going to bother?
It was abysmal. You'd have got chin for that at pub team, but George, we forgot the Tamworth midfielder who did the 360 turn against the Spurs midfield. That was absolutely epic, by the way. The Tamworth midfielder for that, he'll be dying out on that one forever. He really, really will. But there was another situation with Arsenal as well. So kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly here. So I mean, Kai Havertz was just bad. He was absolutely shit, really, in that game, and he's not been very good for Arsenal for a long period of time. And Domino's Pieces decided to get in the bandwagon and take the piss and say, sorry if we missed any orders tonight. We've just had this guy start, which was a great shithousery because he was really, really bad. He was terrible against us. He missed an easy header. But just as a side piece, all these wanks threatening his missus on social media, get a fucking grip of yourself, man. What is going on? You know, the guy can be shit at football, right? Call him shit in a tweet. Say you're shit, mate. Take the piss like Domino's have done. Don't start, wishing his wife ill in their unborn baby and that. I mean, you got to be a special type of see you next Tuesday to do that bollocks, Mark, haven't you?
I was actually gonna use it, to be honest with you. I wasn't going to spell it out. I mean, that is a special level of vileness. Yes, you can be angry with what's going on. Yes, you can have a go at players for playing poorly and stuff, but fucking hell, that kind of stuff is just you've got to leave that one out. I mean, look, Havertz is shocking. He's an awful footballer, and the Chelsea fans are absolutely wetting themselves at the fact that when he signed for Arsenal fans, but he was playing for a shit Chelsea side. We're going to get the best out of him. He has a purple patch of about 10 games, and Chelsea fans are going, "See, we told you." We told you he was like this. He's trouble, and that the penalty incident,
dreadful.
Is just. I mean, the whole. To be fair, I've gone back and watched an awful lot of that. The referee was abysmal in that game. I mean, utterly. I mean, Andy Madley.
We say that every week.
Is anybody shocked that Andy Madley was that bad?
Every week.
But that penalty is just awful. Some of the decisions were dreadful. But I mean, Kai Havertz, if they don't bring in another striker, I think Arteta wants to be sacked on the spot because it's glaringly obvious what their problem is.
He possibly will. You're right, Dean. I mean, what kind of moron slag players' families?
It's
nonsense
ridiculous.
It's absolutely fucking pathetic. It really is. But let's get back to something a little bit more nice and heartfelt with the FA Cup. This was lovely. He gets a lot of shit. There's Trent Alexander-Arnold, especially recently with the whole contract situation, and will he stay, will he go? But this was a really lovely moment. So Trent was brilliant in this game. He scored an absolutely brilliant goal, to be fair. And this was him at the end of the game, embracing the Accrington Stanley manager who coached Trent when he was a 6 or 7 year old. And he wasn't sure if Trent would remember him, and he comes straight up to him, full time, full of smiles, remembering who he was, give him a cuddle, obviously wished him well and everything. That was class act from Trent, I thought, mate. And well deserved to get a bit of credit off people for it, because he's had a lot of stick recently, and that just shows you there's a good lad in there, isn't there, really, mate?
Yeah, definitely. I think he also swapped his shirt with one of the ex-Liverpool Academy lads that had gone through, so knew from there. I thought it was a nice little touch. It was a good weekend for little touches like that, I thought.
Yeah.
Actually, again, Spurs and Tamworth, I haven't got it on here, but Archie Gray was given a scarf by one of the Tamworth fans and handed over his boots to the kids. So just little touches like that. You get players that get it.
I think Madison posted something nice as well about the Tamworth keeper, didn't he, as well?
Yeah,
really nice.
Really.
Yeah.
We give Madison some shit because he can be a bit of a shithouse on the pitch, but actually, I think he's a rather decent human being underneath all the bravado and stuff. But it's the FA Cup. This round, when there are those lower league clubs, sometimes just bring out the best in some of those players that remember their roots, remember the players that have gone. I guess the likes of Woodman that have come up this weekend as well. There's all those little links to things, but yeah, Trent, I think it's just a nice little moment, and you're right, he's had some shit over the last couple of weeks, and I think that's a really nice touch.
No, absolutely. I think it's well deserved praise, but from the sublime from Trent to the ridiculous, really, in my opinion. So Manchester City hosted Salford. I think they were so good. Even Jack Grealish scored. Was that a year took since Jack Grealish scored? I think they won 8-0, didn't it? This was weird as fuck for me. So Ryan Giggs is the director of football at Salford City, part owner amongst the rest of the class of '92, and for some weird reason, he was in the dugout. Did you get that, Mark? I don't get that. I don't understand that. In that game, why was he making that about him when it should be about his team? His manager. I don't get that at all.
Does he do it for? I mean, the question I would ask at that point is, does he do it for other games? If he's always there, then fair enough. If this is just a one-off, I
don't know enough to tell you that, really, mate.
It does strike me as odd. If he's never involved in the first team in that side, and he's not on the touchline for other games, then why all of a sudden put yourself in that position for this one? So, but yeah, director of football on the bench does strike me as a little peculiar. Weird. But like I say, if he's done it all season and he's always there, then I can kind of hold up and go, all right, you've always done it, so fair enough. But yeah, exactly.
I was thinking that, George. I was thinking that, to be fair. But by the way, Newcastle United target James McAtee hat-trick in that game, by the way. Go watch the highlights if you haven't seen it. So very, very talented player. I'm not too sure we'll get to him, but a very talented player, certainly with some of the big German Bundesliga teams after him, because we've all seen how good that is in terms of a development of a player at the minute as well. But just finishing up on a couple of weird stories. So some of the ex-players were doing the rounds, and it was an indoor football tournament. I've seen Aguero score a really good goal. And another former Premier League, I wouldn't call him a great, decided, certainly not. So this is Lucas Podolski, goes absolutely fucking mad in a friendly game, and he only gets a yellow card, and nearly broke a player's leg. And then he did this. After this, you haven't got the clip or the images, but after this, he decided to then go nuts and try and fight about 6 or 7 people in a friendly game. I'm not entirely sure. I don't think cocaine is really prohibited, in friendly games, Podolski. And what the fuck was he thinking about, the crazy bastard? I never saw him do that as a player when he was playing for fucking Bayern Munich or Arsenal.
I think Podolski, there is a little bit of a screw loose in his head, I think, at times. He does have a little bit of that red mist in him. But I mean, that's a shocking tackle. It's absolutely dreadful. In any game, let alone a friendly, but even more so in the fact that it's a friendly. But then to have the reaction after, I want to know how he wasn't sent off. We talked about the friendly and sends off for the Stuttgart game the other week, didn't we, with Davy Classen not getting sent or being sent off and then allowed to play on. But fucking hell, that's a shocking time, even for a Saturday morning game. That's a dreadful. I mean, you'd been proud of that.
Yeah, we've seen some awful tackles in those kind of leagues. You're right, Ian, and that was absolutely abysmal. But listen, no matter how bad of a day Podolski's having or you're having, just remember you could be Lee Ryder and you could think that Sven Botman was playing in a game of the day where he wasn't playing. So that talk about bad day at the office, Lee. Time to check your work before you submit it, Bonnie lads. So that's a great way, I think, to end this show, Mark, on a chronicle flop up, isn't it? Really?
I mean. Yeah, I don't. It's funny because one of my group chats, somebody put in there and said, "Who even reads the Ronnie Gill anymore?" And I went, "Well, certainly not their editors anyway, because who the hell has let that? Oh, Jesus,
dreadful.
Honestly,
absolutely dreadful.
That's very, very much been a copy and paste a team, and he's not changed the team out from somewhere clearly. But if you're putting that to and not that's to print. That's not even just we'll put that on the website and you can quickly go in and change it. That's to print. You've allowed that to go to. That's yeah.
George says the Troy Deeney Team of the Week School of Journalism.
I think we need this award.
Yes, a great way to put it as well. Ian says he was playing. He was, I'm sure he was, Ian. I'm sure he was. But that's us all done for today then, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We love all the comments. It really helps the episodes flow. Make sure you like and subscribe the channel as well. We will be back, obviously, Newcastle are back in action on Wednesday, so we'll be back with a Wolves preview. I'll probably nip off and record that in a moment, and it'll be up on the channel very soon. And then I will be back for the post-match analysis after, hopefully, we beat Wolves on Wednesday night, and Newcastle keep continuing their push for the Champions League position. Have a bell, everyone. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next Evermore. Cheerio.
See you guys. Take care.